When I grew up, it was under the poverty level. Our family wasn't rich by any means, and I don't think it was a bad thing. I think it was a good thing. My family, my siblings, we learned how to work. We learned the value of a dollar. Um, we understood the difference between a right and a privilege. And we obviously over the years we still learn those things and still learning. But back then, it kind of shaped me in good ways and bad ways, I suppose. There were times when I wouldn't ask things from God because I felt like I have enough, and there were some things that I just don't need. But then I saw this verse in the Bible that said, "Present your requests to God, even though He knows them. Present your requests to God. Let the peace of Christ rule in your heart." And so I began to present my requests to God. But up until for a long time, I wasn't presenting my request to God because God knew my needs and I don't need to ask. Now, part of that, I learned that attitude from a guy named George Mueller, who I'd read about in my early Christianity. George Mueller lived in the 1800s. He and his wife established several orphanages in England, in the poorest of the poor places, where many people were struggling with finances and stuff like that, and orphans were treated very, very badly, of course. But he and his wife established, among many other things, these orphanages. Started in his own house, actually, his rented house, back in 1830s, like 1836. And he had his own house turned into an orphanage, and he had 30 children. And the next thing you know, they had a few other houses on Wilson Street, up to 130 kids, and the neighbors actually began to complain about, there's too much noise, there's too many children running around here. But, the thing about him, he never once asked for anything from man. He never once went and solicited funds. He never asked the government for funding. And yet, his organization in the 1800s had over £1 million go through their coffers. Like, in our day, it would be like 113 million pounds that went through the organization that George Mueller started. It's incredible. I mean, he used the money for not only the orphanages, but for supporting other missionaries like Hudson Taylor. He used the money to print Christian tracts, literally hundreds of thousands. Also give away over 1 million New Testaments, give away 250,000 Old Testament, like the whole Bible. So he was just a going concern, just all the time. But never once did he solicit funds. Never once did he go with his hand out. He would just believe that God knew his needs and would provide. And so he would go to his knees and he would pray, and God would provide, sometimes in very miraculous ways. When the neighbors started really complaining, he thought, you know what, I probably should develop one big house and have all the orphans in one big house. And so this architect came along and he said he would like to draw up this house for free. And that kind of thing happened to him all the time. And so they established this big house. And I have written down some of the stats there, that it was at Ashley Downs, where in Bristol, England, where they made this big house, and through the big house, over 1,700 children were accommodated, and actually in 5 homes, including the big house. And they had room for 2,050. Think about it, but. By 1870, 1,700 children. They no requests for financial support, nor did he go into debt, and he opened up this new big house. So many times he received help in miraculous ways. One real overly documented occasion, they were giving thanks for breakfast at the meal when there was absolutely no food in the house. They're at the table with the orphans, thanking God for the provision of food, when all of a sudden there was a knock at the door, and the baker was there with some day-old bread, asked if they would like the bread. And then all of a sudden a a milk delivery man came to the door with milk, saying that his van just happened to break down in front of the orphanage. Not sure why, but would they mind taking the milk so it wouldn't go bad? That kind of thing, it just reminded me of the faithfulness of God. In his own autobiography, George Mueller wrote this in 1842. A brother in the Lord came to me this morning, and after a few minutes of conversation, he gave me £2,000 for furnishing the new big house, the orphan house. Now I'm able to meet all of the expenses. In all probability, I will even have several £100 more than I need. The Lord not only gives as much as is absolutely necessary for the work, but he gives abundantly. This blessing filled me with inexplicable delight. He had given me the full answer to my thousands of prayers during the 1,195 days. It's stories like that kind of keep me going sometimes. That stories that point to the faithfulness of God, that he is able to make all grace abound to us, so that in all things, at all times, having all you need, you will abound to every good work that he's prepared in advance for us to do. We can trust him. If we trust him and pray and seek his face and turn from our wicked ways, he is going to provide. He is going to look after us. Someone once said, God's work done God's way will never lack God's supply. Let's be those kind of people who really trust the Lord to do what he said he would do. He will look after us.